Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 222. Nice rolls off the tongue like that. This is for our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use and talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite a few subspecies, but we've also got a few extinct animals, which is, rather cool. And don't want to keep you around too much. We're going to get stuck right into this one. So, starting off, we've got Sky Polaris with his first few mods. We are starting off with the Eastern White-Bearded Wildebeest or Gnu. So these guys are the same species of, they're a population or subspecies within the blue wildebeest. These guys have the scientific name Alba Judas, which means white mane. So these guys, what sets them apart quite a bit is that they've got a white beard, as you can see, unlike most other subspecies that have black beards. But both sexes have quite smooth cow-like horns like this. So in terms of size, these guys get to about 1.2 to 1.4 meters, or 50-58 inches from the holder for males. And females, a little bit smaller, about 1.1 to 1.4 meters, or about 46 to 57 inches at the shoulder for females. As you can see there, as they kind of like huddle into each other, which is a little interesting. See if you can find the male. Where is he? There he is. Always got to look for the big, impressive male. In terms of their diet, these guys tend to prefer short grass, but will eat taller grasses during the dry season and will drink about twice a day. They have a gestation period of about 240 to 255 days and will nurse their young for about 4 to 9 months. As you can kind of see the young there. They reach sexual maturity about 3 or 4 years for males. As they get bigger, females are about 2.5. These guys are also found in Kenya and Tanzania and Eastern Africa, so kind of the Eastern compared to the Western, as we'll get into. So these guys are found a little bit more east. They can live up to 20 years of captivity and are found in grasslands habitats. So these are the ones that you kind of see migrating as well, along with the Western wildebeest. There is some large migrations that they move around, and up to about 1 million individuals. And they seem to have actually done quite well. They've actually improved in numbers. There was actually a disease going through and wiping out a lot of wildebeest. At one point, it was in the 1950s, there was thought to be only about 100,000 individuals in the Serengeti, but today it's believed to be about 1.5 million being present. However, these guys are threatened by things such as the human growth of civilization, blocking their migration routes, that disrupts their patterns. But they're quite important to the ecosystems they live in. They, there's a lot of them, and all the trampling and grazing of the grasses by such large herds really stimulates growth of grasses, and also all the fertilizer they produce is really important for those plants as well. And they are quite important in the ecosystem to be food for animals like hyenas and lions. So they're quite important in that regard. Be really, really cool. That's the Eastern. Next up, we're going to have a look at the Western, also known as Sky Polaris. The main difference between these guys are a little bit smaller. So the Western white-bearded wildebeest is Mersini, also known as the Merson's wildebeest, or Murren's white-bearded wildebeest, or the Serengeti wildebeest. These guys are a subspecies that basically are famous for being the smallest and the lightest of them. There's only one subspecies. There's one of the only subspecies that does have a substantial population, or sustainable population in Serengeti National Park, with a population of about 1 million individuals. And they're actually known for one of the greatest migrations between Tanzania and Kenya. So quite a huge migration going on there. So in terms of their size, the Western white-bearded wildebeest reach an average between 1.3 to 1.42 meters, or between 4'2" and 4'6". So so it's even smaller than the Eastern wildebeest. These guys weigh between 180 to 225 kilos, between 396 to 146 pounds. In comparison, the weight for the Easterns was 165 and 274 kilograms, so between 360 to 600 pounds for males, and 140 to 230 kilograms for between 510 and 308 pounds for females. So definitely a bit smaller there. So pretty much like a large male is the same size as a large female Eastern, pretty much. They have these long white beards, as you can see, very similar to the Easterns. They've got a black front face and dark coloured body, also smaller horns, and a long tail. And they're actually 50 kilos lighter than the nominate subspecies, which is your typical blue wildebeest. And they're also about 10 centimeters shorter, or about 3 inches shorter. So these guys are native to northwestern Tanzania and southwestern Kenya. And in Tanzania, the populations cover the Serengeti National Park, and they're quite common there. And they're also seen in the Masai Mara in Kenya, and very similar to other species, populations of wildebeest. These guys are found mostly in savannas, grasses, and some dry forests, and the western white-bearded ranges entirely within that tropic zone, so they do like warm areas, near the equator. So very, very cool. Another cool little guy, and you can see these baby wildebeest. Very, very cute. So those are done by Sky Polaris. Next one's also done by Sky Polaris. We have got the Grant's zebra. So Grant's zebra is a very interesting one here. So this is one of the 7 subspecies of the plain zebra, or Equus quagga. So this is Equus quagga bohumi. This subspecies represents the form that lives in the Serengeti Masai Mara kind of ecosystem there, and is the one found typically across Central Africa. So these guys are distinguished or distributed across the Zambian West, Zambia, from the Lungwana River down into the Republic of the Congo, to Tanzania, and to Kenya, and even down the Great Rift Valley, and in southernmost Ethiopia. And also be found in Somalia, so quite a wide range. It was originally actually another subspecies, Equus quagga zambeziensis, the upper Zambezi zebra, that was thought to be a different subspecies, but then was lumped into these guys as they could not really be told apart, so they combined them. So in terms of this one, this northern subspecies tends to be a bit different in terms of its stripes. It is vertically striped on the front, horizontally along the back legs, and diagonally along the rump. Shadow stripes are absent or poorly expressed, so tend to be very much, these darker lines there, very obvious. The stripes, as well as the inner spaces, is broad and well defined, and these guys may lack a mane at sometimes. They do get quite a decent size too. They reach between 182 to 243 centimeters, which is 8 feet long, and about 120 to 140 centimeters, or about 3.9 to 4.6 feet tall. And they generally weigh about 300 kilograms, or 660 pounds. The zebra lives in family groups of up to 18, that is led by a single dominant male stallion, and they can live up to about 20 years. So that's very interesting as well. So they are considered quite common still. I believe they're still considered quite common, yep. But they have been extirpated from some areas such as Congo, Rwanda, Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Uganda because of recent civil wars. They have been extirpated from Burundi and Angola. They were thought to have been extirpated from there, as they were once abundant, but they're kind of just they're thought to be extinct from Angola, but there hasn't been really many surveys to have a good look. There are more Grant zebras in the wild than any other subspecies of zebra, though. Unlike grevy's and mountain zebras, they are not endangered. Zebras eat the coarse grass that grow on the African plains and are quite resistant to diseases they can get from domestic livestock. And so the zebras, these guys do quite well on the African savanna. However, some more recent civil wars and political conflicts in African countries has caused them to have regional extinctions. And sometimes zebras are actually killed for their coats or eliminated competition for domestic livestock. So they kill them so they don't compete with their livestock. There has been some controversies, though. The Kisaman Formation reintroduced wildlife into the Kisam National Park in Angola. And this was a project that was dubbed Operation Noah's Ark, and they reintroduced as well as a lot of species, but they also reintroduced the area of the Burchell zebra, which is not naturally native there. The Grant zebra would have been native, so there's technically now in Angola, there's 2 different subspecies now. But really, the subspecies, I'm pretty sure if a lot of them are older defined, mainly just on coat differences. I think if someone went back and looked at the genetics, a lot of these subspecies would probably be lumped into maybe a couple subspecies at most. A lot of it's just a variation, and even most of the recent research suggests that a lot of these subspecies are just different patterns and ecoclines, so different populations have different coat patterns for the local habitat. So I don't think even these subspecies would hold up if someone seriously studied them, but whatever. I'm not going to get into that. It's not my decision. But yeah, these guys tend to like savanna woodlands and grasslands, and they're not found in deserts, wetlands, or rainforests, so nowhere too wet or too dry. The mountain variety lives in rocky mountain areas, and the availability of habitat for all species of zebra are shrinking, resulting in population declines, which is a little bit sad. In terms of diet, these guys are exclusively herbivores, and their diet pretty much exclusively almost entirely makes up grasses, but they'll also eat bark and shrubs and stuff like that, and leaves. Um, like all members of the horse family, they spend most of their more time feeding than ruminants. So these guys are not ruminants; they're hindgut fermenters, similar to elephants and rabbits. So antelope and wildebeest are called ruminants because they have multi-chambered stomachs and they chew their cud. Zebras do not do this. They have to break down their cud in the cecum, which is in their large intestine, where they just let it ferment, pretty much. And it's not as effective as breaking down cellulose as the multi-chambered stomachs and the chewing of the cud as things like wildebeest and antelope. So they're not as effective. So they can just eat more. They need to eat more, and hence they need to eat much longer each day than wildebeest or antelope do. But they can also consume grasses and the plants in high fiber content or lower protein levels that ruminants can digest. So that's really interesting as well. In terms of behavior, giant zebras, like many other zebra, are highly social animals, and they frequently change herd structures and will change companions every few months. So they tend to, go around the way a bit. And we'll have a look at the cute little foal, a good opportunity to talk about the cute little foal. So female zebras can have one foal per year, and they have a gestation period of between 360 to 395 days, so pretty much just a year, depending on the species. The mother will protect her foal, and it can stand, walk, and run shortly after birth. And this is especially important as foals are vulnerable to predators. And the foals will nurse from their mother from up to 1 year after being weaned. So not too different in that regard to most other zebras. But really, really cool. Nice population, nice little, some variety in your zebras if you want them. So yeah, really, really cool. Next up, we've got our last subspecies for today by Sky Polaris. The rest will all be mods by Great Cakes. But here we have got the Olympic black bear. So the Olympic black bear is a population of bears. Its scientific name is Ursus americanus altifrontis, or differentalis. So these guys are not too dissimilar from your typical black bear. They're a medium-sized bear. They are larger than the adjoining populations of the California black bear and the cinnamon black bear. So these guys, they range from the North American Pacific Northwest coast, from central British Columbia southwards to northern California, and inlands the tip of northern Idaho and Columbia. In Oregon and California, they're found only on the west of the Cascade Range, and the subspecies of black bear is actually thought to be kind of geographically separated from the California black bear by the Klamath Mountains in north of California. So they have quite a wide range. They can be found, a lot of that Olympic National Park is where they're typically found as well. So that kind of big peninsula going on there. In terms of their habitat, very similar to other black bears, they typically kind of hang out in forested areas and meadows, often close to water. Their population ought to be quite stable, and they can live up to 18 years in the wild, but there's probably individuals up to 30 years as well. So yeah, very long-lived, very interesting too. Like all black bears, the Olympic black bear is an herbivore, but mainly herbivorous in habit. So in spring, they'll feed on mainly berries and kind of flowering plants or forbs. In the summer, on berries and fruit and nuts. And in autumn, they'll eat a lot of nuts and acorns. But in summer and autumn, they'll also eat a lot of fish, as well as carrion. They'll eat carrion and eat insect larvae and other insects and stuff as available, which is interesting. And in terms of their behavior, during the spring and summer, these guys are the most active during daylight or around dusk and dawn. And winter approaches, they become more nocturnal in their habits. Breeding usually begins when females reach between 3 to 5 years old. And you can see we've got these cute little cubs going on. Where are these cute little cubs? There they go, cute little cubs. Cute little cubbies there. So normally litters are 2 to 3 cubs, but the first litter is typically just one cub. Mating will typically occur between July, with the cubs being born in the winter, den, and the last week of January, or the first 2 weeks of February. And they use stumps, usually dens, usually under stumps or logs or hollows, or excavated holes in the hillside. And they've been made into hollow trees, caves, drainage culverts, and the abandoned buildings as well. And these guys, black bears are not doing too bad. They're still quite common, but they are threatened by habitat loss and conflict with humans, as they often can be hunted. They like to steal people's rubbish and eat them, so that's conflict with people. But also climate change may be a big issue with these guys. So let's see what other information we can find on these guys. Endemic to the Olympic Peninsula. So yeah, quite a big place, the Olympic National Park. Yeah, really, really cool subspecies that we get to talk about. So that's it for Skypolaris. All done a great job with them. So next up, we've got Great Cakes Mod giving us Wakaleo, also named scientific name in Latin means a little lion, which is, I think, very cute. So we'll actually see if someone's climbing. There's got to be one up there. Is that an adult or a baby? Yeah, that's the adult. That's the female. And don't do that to me, please. Please don't. You're so rude. Anyway, now we'll carry on. So this is Wakaleo, or Little Lion. So this guy looks familiar to you. He is actually one of the relatives of Thylacoleo. If you've seen New Prehistoric Planet Ice Age, you'll be familiar with those guys. One of the biggest marsupial carnivores of all time, living in Australia. These guys were an early ancestor. So Waka means small or little lion. And they're an extinct genus of medium-sized thylacolonids that lived in Australia and during the late Oligocene and into the Miocene, which is interesting as well. The genus itself was first erected in 1974 by W.A. Clemens and M. Plain, and there are 5 species known in this genus. This particular species, I think, is Velalunari. This one is one of the larger ones, but we do have some that are smaller and a couple that are bigger. So these guys are, as I mentioned, marsupial lions. That's what they're kind of known as. The size of Wakaleo kind of actually increases over evolution, potentially with the increase in size of prey. As Australia became drier and more grasslands, that mean bigger animals could evolve to live in those grassland habitats. So the first kind of species found is Scotini, which was estimated to be about 23 kilos, or about 51 pounds, comparable size of a dog, while Vanderlundi and Alacortensis, which was actually the first one described, are estimated to have a body mass of about 30 or 66 pounds to 50 kilograms, or 1,110 pounds respectively. So basically up to the size of a leopard. We'll actually look in here. Look is Miocene Northern Territory. How big does it say this guy gets? So yeah, this is probably like how they lumped it. Carnivorous. Yep. Okay. Yeah, they're related to Diprotodonts, so they're type of related to wombats and those. I'll have a look at you there because you're very cute. Anyway, so as I mentioned, there's a bunch of different species. Alacortensis is the one that was kind of the first one found. But this species here, Valerundi, these are the type species fossils that have been found in the Bullock Creek in the Northern Territory and have been found in river sleighs, so in those kind of limestone deposits there. The first fossil itself was a right dentary and found in 1967 by a group of field workers at Bullock Creek in the Northern Territory, and there's another left dentary of the species actually preserved in quite a good state. And then since more of the fossil has been recovered, there's actually a well-preserved near-complete cranium with the mandible intact, so that gives us a good idea as well. There was actually one, if you know Peter Scoton, which is a quite renowned paleoartist, he got that species named after him. So it's very interesting to see how they've evolved over time and stuff like that. I won't give too much because there's so many different species. I could probably go into them, but I tend to focus on the species when I get the species there, but that's fine. The general trend, as we can see, the various species will have all thought to have been carnivores, and it seems to be the later species because the larger species, as mentioned in Alacortensis, it's from Alacorta fauna. I believe that is the oldest, but there is kind of a general trend of them getting larger over time. And later species tend to be larger. This is one of the later species, so one of the larger species. They show increasing adaptations as well for terrestrial locomotion. So early species of Wakaleo were thought to be very much well adapted to climbing, and climate getting prey in the trees. But as Australia dried out and prey got bigger, they would have potentially come down from the trees to hunt on the ground more, and then would have gotten larger to better grapple and deal with the larger prey. And that kind of reached its apex with Thylacoleo, which was the largest of them all, about the size of a lion or female lion or a large leopard. So quite a large animal, and it was dealing, with very large Australian marsupials. So yeah, they did a good job, I think. And it's nice to see a reconstruction of this. That looks actually pretty spot on. So Thylacoleo does have a few species. I think it has Microleo and a couple other species. Wakaleo is kind of the more famous one. There's a few different species Carnifex as well, and Thylacoleo was kind of the last and the greatest of them all, and then went extinct at the end of the Ice Age. So yeah, very, very cool. Nice to see these guys get some love, as we always like to see. I think the size ranges, is probably just to fit and cover them all. You just have to pick a species sometimes. But yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. Very cute animation. Alright, so next up, we've got another Great Hex mod. We've got an extinct, going about the same time, but we're going to Africa. We've got a cute little felid here. So this is called Acelosmilus. So Acelosmilus is actually a genus of very small felid that is known from what is now Kenya, from the early Miocene, so about 20 to 15 million years ago. Despite its fragmentary remains, it is quite remarkable for its small size and relatively advanced dentition, and is known as the single species Acilofelis courtier. So Acilofelis is actually only known from a single specimen, which is a Mandilia ramus, as well as well-preserved teeth that are stored in the National Museum of Kenya. And the fossils were first discovered in the Hwange Formation on Rizulinga Island, 1949, and was only mentioned once in literature until it was described by Lars Wendelin in 2012. The scientific name, the generic name, comes from Swahili, which is Acili, which means origin, and Latin felis, which means cat. So it's basically the original cat. And Courtier, the specific name, honors Suzanne Cote, who inspired Wendelin's interest in Miocene Africa. So it's quite cool to have, to honor that, as a lot of scientists like to do. Very, very cute, by the way. So Acilofelis is much smaller than other Miocene felids and is comparable to some of the smallest extant species, like black-footed cats, which we'll talk about soon, those smaller species. Comparable in size even to the rusty spotted cat, which weighed about 1 to 1.6 kilos, so very small. And what's very interesting as well, its dentition is extremely modern in comparison to other felids that lived with it, which most of them, like Dianamofelis and Namafelis, which we've covered before, or Catiphelus, they all were kind of within this Silurus grade. So like between Silurus grade or like early cat and then your modern cat. But these guys were very modern cat at a time where most other cats were very much in a transitional form. These guys were very modern. They seem to have, like, their teeth were more similar to that of, comparable to that of black-footed cats, which we're going to be covering next as well. So these guys were very similar in their teeth in a lot of ways to more modern felids compared to a lot of their relatives, which are more transitional forms. So what this says about this guy, a lot of the felids at the time were basal species with primitive features. They were thought to have given rise to more felis grade animals, such as Pristofelis, that wouldn't have appeared until 11 million years ago. But this guy living in early Miocene, 20 million years ago, that kind of throws a whole spanner in the works. So it's very surprising that you have an animal with such derived dentition and derived anatomy living. Let's see if we can find one climbing. We'll see. We'll follow you climbing. We'll follow the male for a bit. But anyway, so it's really weird that you're getting such early cats or cats with early cats or derived cats with that really modern looking teeth at a time that's really early in their evolution. So that kind of threw a spanner in the works of that idea. It is possible though, so there's some hypotheses that kind of explain this. The existence of a felid as a derived as a Acilofelis in early Miocene rocks is quite surprising. So they think the potentially could have been forced into this hypercarnivorous role much earlier than its Eurasian relatives because they had more competition, as there were quite abundant civids and mongooses living in the area. So there's a lot of competition, lots of different species to compete with. So to basically find their niche, they had to evolve to be, right onto hypercarnivory. It is also speculated that they gave rise to modern felid, And that could actually potentially explain how suddenly they appear in the fossil record of modern felids appear in the fossil record in Europe as they go into the late Miocene and then Eurasia, as they could have basically just migrated from Africa into Eurasia. But however, there are limited materials, and as the fossil record is always, very patchy, there isn't really enough to say for certain, it makes these impossible to confirm. But there are a lot of fossils of other early Miocene African felids, as they're limited, and they more represent that much larger, as I mentioned, Solidararis grade, which includes Deinamophelus and Namophelus. And these relationships between these guys and Acylophilus potentially means there was potentially 2 different dispersal events into Africa of these felids. And furthermore, as mentioned, Catyphilus, which I covered a while ago, is another species with these kind of most features, are slightly younger. And so it's very interesting there. And then we also had Macharodus, which is Charodont, so it's related to other saber-toothed cats like Smilodon, appeared around about 12 million years ago. So this gap in the fossil record could be explained by inhabited, poorly sampled habitats, or alternatively were excluded by these ecosystems. So these guys were typically excluded because of mongooses and civets, and they kind of took the niches that the small cats would have, and they couldn't get a word in, pretty much. But yeah, these guys live in a very rich formation, so let's see if we can actually find... Is Mum going to climb up? Anyone going to climb up for me, please? I think she will. I have a feeling she will. No, she won't. Anyway, we'll have a look at the cute little babies while we talk about their because you are very cute, if I do say so myself. But anyway, so the fossil bed member of the Huingal Formation, where the species is found, likely represents a more woodland or mosaic forest, as at the time Africa was a lot more forested than it is today. The fossil assemblage itself is quite rich and includes a very high diversity of rodents from various families, as well as a lot of small mammals that belong to the group such as tenrecs, elephant shrews, and hedgehogs. There's also carnivorans such as the viverrid Hesperides and Coccinea, also the hyenodont Exglunodon, and also the barbrophelid Aphrosmilus, and also the bear dog Sonalis. So lots of ancient things like amphicyonids and barbrophelids and hyenodonts, and another hyenodonts such as Halimeraris and Dicipilatus as well. There's also a large number of primates found, as well as the early ape and Kembo. Acylophilus also lived with a variety of rhinos, proboscideans such as Prodinotherium, several different types of pig, early giraffe relatives that didn't look like giraffes, like more like okapis, and the crocodilians, Ethunocodon and Brachiosuchus. So yeah, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So are you going to climb? I love that you do it like right... Oh, there you go. There was Mum there climbing. Missed that, but anyway, we'll see the other guys climbing as well. So yeah, Acylophilus, a really cool little cat there, cool little cat. Next up, for last but certainly not least, we've got the black-footed cat. So let's have a look at the black-footed cat over here. Have a little stretch there, how amazing. So the black-footed cat, very, very cool little guy. So the black-footed cat, or Felis neripens, is also called the small spotted cat. These guys are the smallest cat in Africa, having a head to body length of between 35 to 52 centimeters or 14 to 20 inches. Despite its name, only the soles on its feet are black or dark brown, and with the bold small spots or stripes on its tawny fur, it is quite well camouflaged, especially on moonlit nights. So in terms of its phylogeny and how it kind of came to be, the scientific name was used by British explorer William John Burchell. You've probably recognized his name from just before. In 1842, he described the species based on skins of small spotted cats he encountered in South Africa. Felis microphelis neripens thomasoni was actually proposed as a subspecies, but their only really difference is that they were darker than your normal, typical black-footed cat. But it seems like now they're just considered just darker. They're a monotypic species, so there's no subspecies or anything, just the one population. In terms of their phylogeny, it seems that all Felidae kind of evolved in Africa during Asia during the Miocene, about 14 to 8 million years ago. And the black-footed cat was actually one of the earliest lineages that split off of Felis. So their closest relatives are the jungle cat and the sand cat. So these guys are considered quite basal. These guys would have diverged from a common ancestor about 4 to 2 million years ago, so in the Pliocene or Pleistocene. and these guys would have again diverged potentially about 6 to 1 million years ago. But most models agree that jungle cats would have been the first to diverge, and then there's followed by the jungle cat. And there have not been really fossil remains of these cats found, but they possibly migrated into the Pleistocene. And this migration would have been helped because there would have been lower sea levels during the time. So you can see, very, very small little goober guy. Let's see if we can find one hanging around that's not sleeping. Have a look at Mum, as she looks like she's busy. The black-footed cat has tawny fur that is entirely covered in black spots. The head is darker than the rest of the body, but paler above the eyes. Its whiskers are white, and its ears bear grizzled down dark brown hairs. On the neck and back, ooh, that was a big jump there. As you can see, there's kind of some spots turn into elongated stripes, and these spots form transverse stripes down the shoulders, and the forelimbs and hind legs bear irregular kind of stripes. And the tail, as you can see, also confusedly spotted, so very interesting. And you can see, as well, the black-footed cat, where it gets its name, because a lot of the stripes are around the bottom of their feet, as you see there. The throat rings are also black semicircles, and they vary in colour from dusky brown to pale rufus colours, and are narrow-edged. Some individuals, though, they have a pure white belly with a tawny tinge that blend into the tawny colour of the flanks. The eyes, ears, and mouth are a pale off-white, so they're not quite white, but pale off-white. As well, and individuals vary in background colour from sandy to pale ochre or dark ochre in colour. Though in northern parts of their range they tend to be lighter in colour than their southern parts of their range, where the spots and bands can be much more clearly defined. The 3 rings on the throat, though, are also reddish brown to black, with the 3rd ring broken in some individuals. They also have about 25. The black bands you can see also become narrow towards the paws, as you're going to see that black, where they get their name. Their fur is actually becomes thicker and longer during winter, and it gets about 25 to 30 millimeters. These are long guard hairs, and the underfur is quite dense. And their pupils, they have a vertical slit, very similar to all other felid species, and they are light green to dark grey in colour in terms of their eyes. They're also, as I mentioned, the smallest species of cat in Africa, with females measuring between 33 to 38 centimetres, or about 13 to 14 inches in head to body length, with a 15 to 17 centimetre or 6-inch tail, with males being about 42 to 50 centimetres, or about 16 to 19 inches, and a 15 to 20 centimetre tail, or 6 to 8 inch tail. Its tapering tail is about half the length of the body. Their ear canals as well, their skull is quite short, and they have small pointed ears that are about 45 to 50 millimeters in females, and the males are just like another 5 centimeters or so. They have a shoulder height that is less than 25 centimeters, or about 9 inches, and the females will weigh between 1.1 to 1.6 kilograms, or between 2.4 to 3.6 pounds, and males weigh between 1.6 and 2.4 kilograms, or 3.5 to 5.4 pounds. And they're quite easy to distinguish from other cats, such as the African wild cat, as they are much bigger than the black-footed cat and have longer legs. And the serval is also much bigger than that again, so they're very hard to confuse with other species. In terms of their distribution and habitat, they are endemic to southern Africa. Their distribution is much more restricted than other small cats in the region. Their range extends from South Africa northwest into Botswana, and where it was recorded until the late 1960s. It's also been recorded in Namibia, extremely southern Angola, and southern Zimbabwe, and is unlikely to occur in Lesotho and Eswatini. It inhabits open, arid savanna areas and semi-arid scrublands in the Karoo and southwestern Kalahari, with areas with short grass, low bush cover, and scattered clumps of low bush and higher grasses. They also have been recorded at elevations up to 2,000 meters above sea level. So in terms of the ecology of these guys are nocturnal and usually solitary, except when females care for their kittens. They spend their day resting in hollow termite mounds or dense cover in unoccupied burrows made by South African spring hares, aardvarks, and Cape porcupines. They'll also dig quite vigorously to actually modify these burrows for shelter, and after sunset they typically emerge to hunt. They seek refuge at the slightest disturbance and often use termite mounds as cover or for bearing its young. And when concerned, they'll defend itself quite fiercely, and due to this habit, and they're also considered quite a lot of courage there, they are called the Mishwastopper in parts of South Africa, which means anthill tiger, and there's actually a San legend that a Blackfoot cat can actually kill a giraffe by piercing its jugular. And that is an exaggeration, of course, but it's used to kind of emphasize their bravery and tenacity there, which is always quite fun. Let's see if there's anyone climbing. I like to look at these guys climbing, but they don't seem to be want to climb. That's fine, though. We won't worry about that. Unlike most cats, though, they're actually considered poor climbers, and it has a stocky body and short tail that is not thought to be conducive to climbing trees. However, they have been seen climbing trees. They're just not as good as your typical cat, I guess. That's probably the best way to put it. So the average female has an average home range of about 6 to 15 square kilometres, or about 2 to 6 square miles in a year, and the resident male has about 19 to 23 square kilometres, or 7 to 9 square miles. And the range of an adult male will overlap with about 1 to 4 females, and they use scent marking throughout their range to kind of mark these territories. They spray urine up to 41 times a day, or in a stretch of 685 meters, and they spray less frequently during pregnancy, though they almost do things that cats do, rubbing objects, raking claws, or depositing feces. That's when they tend to, how they do it. In terms of their calls, they're actually louder than other cats of its size, to allow calls to be heard over larger distances. When close to each other, they use quieter purrs or gurgles. When threatened, they'll hiss and growl, with adult males moving up to about 2 kilometres a night for prey, and they're quite difficult to survey because of their secretive nature. But yeah, a lot of people have been looking in to try and survey them, but they're not a very common cat in terms of... they are considered least concern, I believe. No, they're vulnerable. But they don't live in high densities. So in terms of hunting and diet, these guys will hunt at night irrespective of weather, of temperatures between minus 10 and 35 degrees. They'll attack its prey from the rear, put its forepaws on its flanks and then on the ground, then prey using its dew claws. They do 2 types of hunts. They do a fast hunt, a slow hunt, and a sort of way hunt. It's kind of a self-explanatory. In a fast hunt, they will chase an animal up to about 2 to 3 kilometers an hour and chase them into vegetation cover. And during a slow hunt, they'll also stalk their prey, meandering cautiously throughout the grass, kind of waiting until they can pounce. They can move between 5 to 6 kilometers a night in search of small rodents, using zigzagging and among bushes and termite mounds. And the sit and wait hunting style is typically they'll wait motionless near a rodent den, sometimes with their eyes closed, but they keep their eyes moving and kind of understand, there is something happening there. But due to its small size, the black-footed cat hunts mainly rodents and small birds, but also can prey on Cape hares, which are actually larger than itself. They have a quite high energy requirement because they need about 250 to 300 grams, or about 9 to 11 ounces of prey consumed in a night, which is about a sixth of their body weight, so they eat a lot of food. And they're also able to satisfy its daily water requirements through prey, but drinks water, of course, when it's available. Black-footed cats have been observed hunting about 10 or so different vertebrates in 5 hours of hunting, but they obviously would eat a lot of things. They kill shrews and rodents by a bite to the neck or on the head and consume them completely. They also stalk birds quietly, followed by a quick chase, and they can jump up to 1.4 meters, or about 4 feet, or about a distance of 2 meters or 6 feet to catch them in the air, so quite good jumpers. Then they are pulled down to the ground and consumed. Small birds such as the Cape clapper lark and the spike-headed lark, they'll eat without plucking. Some larger birds, though, they will, like the northern black coran, they ate it for several hours. The remains remain hollows and then cover it with sand. Young springboks, lambs that keep hiding are actually, in their first few days of life, may actually be prey in the right conditions, which is interesting as well. But typically insects as well, like harvester ants, harvester termites, grasshoppers, and moths are actually a small part of their diet as well. But mostly they'll eat things like small mammals and birds. That's their main sort of prey, which is interesting. So let's have a look at you, Mr. Daddy. No, we'll have a look at the babies, actually, because that's what we want to look at now. Is that the female? Or no, there's the kitten. Where's the kitten? There's a kitten. Oh. There's a kitten. Very, very cute. Anyway, so in terms of reproduction, in captivity, they become sexually mature at about 9 months of age for males, and females about 7 months. Their estrus lasts about 36 hours, and gestation will last for about 33 to 68 days. And the female will give birth to up to 2 litters a year. In the southern hemisphere, summers between October and March. Their litter size is typically 1 to 2 kittens, but in rare cases they can have up to 4 kittens. White female black-footed cats observed in the wild were receptive to mating only after about 5 to 10 hours. requiring males to locate them quickly. And males will fight for access to the female, and copulation will occurs nearly every 20 to 50 minutes. The young kittens are born at between 60 to 93 grams, or about 2.1 to 3.3 ounces, and they are born quite blind and relatively helpless, even though they're able to crawl after about a few hours. Their eyes open about 3 to 10 days, and their milk teeth break through at the age of 2 to 3 weeks. Within 1 month, they take solid food, and then are weaned at age 2 months. Their permanent teeth then erupt at about 148 to 158 days. Captive females have been observed trying to shift their kittens into new hiding places every 6 to 10 days after a week of their birth, which is much more frequently than other small cats, and they're able to walk within 2 weeks and start climbing in 3 weeks. In the wild, kittens are born typically in South African spring hare burrows or hollow termite mounds, and from ages of day 4 onwards, the mother will leave her kitten for up to 10 hours during the night. And at the age of 6 weeks, they can move fast and frequently and leave the den. Kittens and subadults though actually risk falling prey to animals such as the black-backed jackal, the caracal, and nocturnal raptors, but they become typically independent after the 3 or 4 months and tend to stay within their mother's home range, and they can live up to about 15 years in captivity, though in the wild, likely it is a lot smaller, which is a little bit sad. But anyway, we'll carry on. In terms of diseases, they do suffer from some diseases like a high prevalence of AA amyloidosis, which should cause chronic inflammatory processes and usually accumulates in kidney failure and death. And they're also susceptible to different diseases that you can get from domestic dogs and cats. So in terms of their threats, as we mentioned, they are vulnerable. So known threats include methods of indiscriminate predator control, such as bait poisoning and steel jaw traps, habitat destruction from overgrazing, declining populations of the South African spring hare, integral predation, diseases, and unsustainable farming practices. And several black-footed cats have been killed by herding dogs, and the majority of protected areas may be too small to actually help conserve these populations. The black-footed cat itself is protected throughout most of its range, though, including in Botswana and South Africa, and where it's illegal to hunt them. But there is a lot of field research, like tracking them with collars and stuff, to try and figure out where they find their home ranges and their diet and stuff. And they actually have monitored their behavior, and they interact a lot with aardwolves, which is very interesting, as they're like a termite-eating hyena, which is interesting as well. And there is some in captivity. So the black-footed cat was first acquired in Warpal Zoo in 1957, and then bred them there in 1963. And as of 2011, there is a stud book that's about 726 captive cats exist, and they have been found in across 74 individuals were kept worldwide and around Germany, the United Arab Emirates, the US, UK, and South Africa. And there have been several zoos that have bred them, such as Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, Brookfield Zoo, and the Philadelphia Zoo, for example. And what's really cool, there's actually a lot of conservation work going into these guys and a lot of research. So the Audubon Nature's Institute for Center for Research for Endangered Species has actually been working on advanced genetics involving these cats. In February 2011, there was a female that actually gave birth to 2 male kittens, the first black-footed cats to be born as a result of in vitro fertilization using frozen and thawed sperm and embryos. That's quite cool as well. And in 2003, the sperm was actually collected and then frozen, and then they used it to fertilize an egg in 2005, creating embryos that were actually thawed and transferred to a surrogate female in December 2010. And the female then carried the embryos and then gave these 2 kittens. The same centre also in the 6th of February 2012, there was a female black-footed cat kitten named Little Crystal. She was born to a domestic surrogate after interspecies embryo transplant. So I think that's very interesting to think how that'll help conservation in the future. If they've got endangered species given a very common relative, we can just put it in that common relative and breed them out. So yeah, very, very cool. But yeah, I think that's about it for today. I think we've done a good job covering everyone. So yeah, I'm going to thank... We've only got 2 monitors to thank today. So thank you, Sky Polaris, for your wildebeests, your zebra, and your black bear. And of course, I've got to thank Great Cakes for your Wakaleo, Acela Felis, and the black-footed cats, who've done a great job there. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.